In the cold gray dawn of October 3, 1899, the town of Selkirk, Montana, awoke to a silence that felt heavier than usual. Nestled in a narrow valley surrounded by dense pine forests and distant mountains, Selkirk had always been quiet, but this morning, the stillness was unnatural menace. The Thornfield house, perched on the northern ridge and overlooking the town like a watchful guardian, showed no signs of life. By midday, a neighbor sent word to the sheriff. The Thornfields were missing. Not just Gabriel and his wife Eleanor, but their 7 daughters, Margaret, Catherine, Eleanor and Elizabeth the twins, Sarah Grace, and the youngest Rebecca. The house was undisturbed breakfast, half-eaten, fires still burning, clothes hanging on lines, as if time had simply stopped. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints, no notes, only the lingering warmth of lives recently lived. As darkness fell over Selkirk and lanterns flickered on along Main Street, whispers of worry turned into murmurs of dread. The Thornfields were not just any family. Gabriel Thornfield was a respected cattle baron, his family deeply rooted in the town's history. Their sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. A search was launched, but no trace of the family could be found. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole, as weeks turned to months, and then to years. The case of the missing Thornfields became legend. Theories abounded. Some claimed they had fled, due to debts or shame. Others whispered of a cult or a secret enemy seeking revenge. A few said the forest had taken them, that the mountains had claimed what was theirs. The truth, however, remained buried hidden beneath layers of time, silence, and fear. In 1922, 23 years after the Thornfields vanished, a set of anonymous letters arrived at the office of Deputy Marshal Everett Langston in Helena, Montana. Each letter contained disturbing details about human trafficking rings operating in the American frontier during the late 19th century. One letter mentioned Selkirk and the Thornfield name. Langston, skeptical but intrigued, reopened the case and began a quiet investigation. Langston discovered records, long-buried reports of missing women from small frontier towns across Montana, Idaho, and the Dakotas, spanning 3 decades. Most had been dismissed as runaway brides or unsolved disappearances until a pattern began to emerge. All were young women, often talented or well-educated, from respected families in isolated communities. They had all vanished between 1885 and 1900. Langston contacted a former Pinkerton agent, Elias Brandt, who had retired in disgrace after accusing several prominent figures of involvement in illegal marriage brokering and human trafficking. Brandt, now a recluse living in Colorado, agreed to assist Langston. He had seen the signs before and believed the Thornfield case was the key to unraveling something far darker and more organized than anyone imagined. Langston and Brandt traced a trail of forged documents, false marriage certificates, and altered census records, leading them to a man named Marcus Peaton, a wealthy industrialist and philanthropist based in Chicago. Peaton operated a network of agents who posed as representatives from matrimonial agencies, promising frontier families suitable husbands for their daughters in more prosperous eastern cities. These agents were well-spoken, well-dressed, and persuasive, offering dreams of security, education, and cultured society in exchange for trust and signatures. They targeted families with multiple daughters, or those recently widowed, like Gabriel Thornfield families, isolated by geography or grief families, willing to believe in hope. Langston uncovered records showing that 7 girls had been listed as arriving in various eastern cities in the spring of 1899, under different surnames, but with identical birth dates and places of origin. With Brandt's help, He cross-referenced these records against Peaton's known business dealings and found several properties that seemed to serve as waypoints for transporting young women across state lines without detection. One property in particular stood out: a private retreat in upstate New York operated by the Pembroke Society, a so-called charitable organization that specialized in rehabilitating wayward or troubled young women. The society had no public-facing programs and no former residents willing or able to speak. Langston believed this was where the Thornfield sisters had first been taken and separated. Through old shipping manifests, Langston and Brandt discovered that in May of 1899, 7 young women had been transported by train under heavy escort from Montana to the East Coast. Each traveled under a different name, with no apparent connection, but their descriptions matched those of the Thornfield sisters. From there, the trail split. Each girl sent to a different destination under the control of a separate handler. Margaret, the eldest, was traced to New Jersey, where she had lived in a private home, operated by a woman named Lydia Pembroke, listed as a mental health caretaker. Neighbors described Margaret as quiet, withdrawn, but strangely composed. She had not been seen since 1905 until Langston uncovered a lead suggesting she was still alive, living under a new name in a secured estate outside Boston. Catherine, who had shown promise as a painter, had vanished into the art circles of Milwaukee. Her works, unsigned, had appeared in private collections starting in 1901, under the name Augustus Richardson Langston. Confirmed Richardson had no artistic training, yet possessed dozens of emotionally raw, technically brilliant paintings that experts now believed had been created by a hidden artist. Possibly Catherine herself. Eleanor and Elizabeth, the twins, were harder to trace. Their trail led to St. Louis and Chicago, respectively. Each had been married to powerful men, involved in banking and trade. Both had assumed new identities and lived in isolated homes, with no known friends or family. Langston believed they had been told their twin was dead in order to break their emotional bond and ensure compliance with their new roles. Sarah had been placed with Reverend Jonathan Morrison, a prominent minister in Detroit, who had requested a wife with musical talents. Sarah performed regularly in church and at social events, but those close to her suspected her life was far from the devotion Morrison publicly portrayed. Grace, the mathematician, was married to Theodore Blackstone, a Chicago businessman, who used her abilities to manage complex financial dealings. Behind closed doors, Grace was coerced into assisting fraudulent schemes and money laundering efforts that enriched Blackstone at the expense of many innocent victims. Rebecca, the youngest sister, had spent years in holding facilities and transit camps before her health deteriorated from constant relocation and neglect. She died of tuberculosis in 1907 in a facility described by investigators as little more than a prison for unwanted victims, too damaged to be sold or used by the trafficking network. The investigators also found evidence that the sisters had suffered various forms of psychological torture and physical abuse, designed to break their spirits and ensure obedience. Their captors isolated them from any potential allies and used threats and violence to suppress any attempts at escape or resistance. The trials following the 1922 arrests became a national sensation, exposing not only the Thornfield case, but also the wider exploitation of vulnerable families across the American frontier. For decades, newspapers detailed the trafficking operation, shocking the public and sparking demands for reforms in law enforcement, interstate commerce regulation, and women's rights. Marcus Peaton, the criminal mastermind, was arrested in a dramatic raid at his Chicago mansion, uncovering evidence of his vast wealth and political connections. The trial revealed a man of extraordinary intelligence who perverted his talents into a criminal empire, operating with near impunity for decades. During testimony, Peaton expressed no remorse. instead showing pride in what he called a successful business enterprise. 17 of Peaton's associates were convicted on charges, including kidnapping, human trafficking, conspiracy, and corruption. Evidence showed the sophisticated nature of the operations and the extent of corruption that allowed their crimes to go undetected. Many powerful figures avoided prosecution due to destroyed evidence, intimidated witnesses, and key deaths before testimony. Prominent politicians, judges, and business leaders involved in the conspiracy escaped criminal charges through influence. Though their reputations were ruined by revelations from the trials, the complexity of corruption revealed how deeply embedded the trafficking network was in society, making full justice difficult to achieve. The 3 surviving Thornfield sisters faced a painful choice when offered the chance to testify and seek justice. Revealing their true identities risked destroying the lives they had rebuilt, putting their children in danger, and exposing them to retaliation. Margaret, now 49, and living as Mary Patterson, chose to testify. Her courage helped establish legal protections for trafficking victims and made her a powerful advocate. Catherine, now Caroline Phillips, living quietly in Milwaukee with children, unaware of her past, chose silence, believing exposing the truth would harm her family. Elizabeth, living as Ellen Pierce in St. Louis, had never fully recovered from trauma and felt unable to relive her experience publicly. Investigators respected their choice, knowing they had already sacrificed enough. The sisters' decisions reflect the difficult balance between seeking justice and protecting survival and family. Their story shows the complex reality many trafficking victims face, needing to protect what little peace they have won. The town of Selkirk never fully recovered from the tragedy and the corruption that enabled it. Many residents left rather than live in a community built on betrayal. The Thornfield mansion remained empty after Gabriel left for Denver and was finally torn down in 1925. The lot stayed vacant, as if the town wanted to erase the painful memory. A new memorial replaced the 7 marble headstones with a single monument inscribed, "To the 7 sisters victims of greed and betrayal, may truth finally set you free." Funded by contributions from Montana residents. Moved by the sisters' story, the memorial ensured their sacrifice would not be forgotten by future generations. The Thornfield case had a far-reaching impact. Beyond Montana, new federal laws improved oversight of employment agencies, matrimonial services, and fostered better cooperation between law enforcement agencies across states. New communication systems and standardized procedures made criminal investigations more effective. The case revealed how economic desperation and social isolation left frontier communities vulnerable to exploitation. Predators like Peaton's organization took advantage of weak law enforcement and poor communication networks to operate with impunity, destroying families and enriching themselves. The investigation highlighted the particular vulnerability of young women. Limited economic opportunities and social restrictions made them dependent on their families. Decisions about their futures. The trafficking organization exploited this by promising opportunities that instead delivered victims into forms of slavery, worse than what they had tried to escape. The legacy of the Thornfield case influenced American law enforcement and social policy for decades. The evidence gathered helped develop strategies to prevent trafficking crimes and protect vulnerable populations. The case increased awareness of social and economic conditions that allowed exploitation to flourish. Gabriel Thornfield's desire to provide better lives for his daughters made him vulnerable to deception. The sisters became victims of a system that treated their youth, beauty, and innocence as commodities rather than human beings, deserving of respect and protection. The 7 sisters of Selkirk paid the ultimate price for their father's ambition and society's willingness to ignore exploitation for profit. Their story shows the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of seeking truth and justice despite great personal sacrifice. The legacy of the Thornfield case influenced American law enforcement and social policy for decades. The evidence gathered helped develop strategies to prevent trafficking crimes and protect vulnerable populations. The case increased awareness of social and economic conditions that allowed exploitation to flourish. Gabriel Thornfield's desire to provide better lives for his daughters made him vulnerable to deception. The sisters became victims of a system that treated their youth beauty and innocence as commodities rather than human beings, deserving of respect and protection. The 7 sisters of Selkirk paid the ultimate price for their father's ambition and society's willingness to ignore exploitation for profit. Their story shows the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of seeking truth and justice despite great personal sacrifice. Leave your comment below and share your theories about what really happened in Selkirk and whether other families may have suffered similar fates. If you enjoyed this tale of historical mystery and want more stories from America's dark past, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with someone who loves mysteries as much as you do. See you in the next video, where we will explore another chilling chapter from our nation's hidden history.